this one is. So right now, based on my understanding of what I read, there is a nationwide injunction against the brace ban.
Which means, in layman's terms,
I've watched like 2 seasons of Suits, so I'm pretty much a lawyer now.
Perfect.
But
it's totally like that as well, by the way. So with nationwide injunction, and this is, I guess, an interesting and important distinction to make. So get that, thank you.
So I got to ask, though, before we get rolling here. 1, I like your shoes.
Thank you.
2, did me and Adam miss the memo, or do you got something else going on?
No, Maddie just told me not to dress like a bum.
So we did miss.
So it's usually like sweatpants and like a t-shirt.
Okay. So
you would be overdressed normally.
I just want to be very clear about this, and Laura knows this backstory. So I was in the desert for 3 days in Arizona. I brought nicer shirts that were at least collared shirts. I wore those there. They probably smell like the desert and not very good. And I had 2 other ones, and I was planning on wearing a nice shirt here. Unfortunately, I had a tub of hand cream that was in my luggage that kind of exploded, and of course it was next to the other 2 nice shirts and like, you know, a pair of gym shorts and something else. So I didn't do laundry before I got here, and I go, I guess I'm getting a t-shirt. I hope it's okay.
No, you look absolutely fine, and we sell Noveski. So
yeah, so there,
even better.
It's a good.
Yeah, I was gonna say if the shirt I had on wasn't good, where's a BTO one that I can throw on?
We've definitely got plenty. But your cohort that you brought with you is dressed appropriately.
I know. She always dresses appropriately. It's me that she has to tell, like, you need to bring a suit, okay?
That's fantastic. Anyway, so.
I'm not really an adult, apparently.
Well, on that note, welcome to the podcast. You know what you're listening to, so we won't spend too much time on that. But I'm Ike. We have Chris, and we are joined today by Adam Kraut from Second Amendment Foundation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time to make the trip over here and sit down and chat with us for a bit.
Yeah, happy to do it.
So you're just coming from Arizona, USPSA match.
Yes.
Out there doing some
outreach.
Yeah.
I was not shooting the USPSA match. It's been, at this point, it's probably been 6 or 7 years since I've shot a USPSA match. So not an area championship for sure. So that was a fun 3 days in the Arizona sun and dust.
Yeah. Though we were out in California, it was definitely pretty dusty up there. I don't think it's as bad as probably what you had, but our shoes were all a different color when we came back.
Well, those paths, they definitely, and if you're out on, in the forest, that dirt gets everywhere.
Yeah.
Did you have a good time at Range Weekend?
Yeah, it was a good time. Saw a lot of people out there. Got to see all the California dudes, so that was cool.
Oh, we've got some video up already from it, and we should have some more video up this week, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So that was
it's beautiful
cool
out there
event
too.
that I definitely missed out on.
Yeah, it was nice. It was up in the mountains, so like you had to go like 30 minutes from town to the mountains, like from the nearest town to the mountains.
That's cool.
You're like driving up through all the windy roads and stuff.
I think a lot of people forget, like, the California gun owning community actually is very big.
So
everybody just kind of ignores the fact that it even exists if you're not in California itself.
Yeah, there's a huge gun culture and gun community out there. Like they're the second biggest, or the second. We ship more stuff to Texas than anybody else, but California's number 2 as far as what we ship.
Yeah.
And that's without being able to send mags and ammo and a lot of the guns.
A lot of other things.
So like they make up for it. They're restricted, but they still make up for it. Like
They kill it on every month. They are there for a while. Washington was kicking it when we were still shipping there, but the story on that one. So
yeah.
So Adam, dude, me and you have known each other via the internet for a long time. Like
what a world to live in where you can say, hey, we've known each other digitally for a long time.
Like a decade, like probably a decade at this point. But this is the first time that I've actually got to sit down and talk to you. So thanks for coming by.
Yeah, happy to do it.
And hanging out with us. So let's talk about Adam Kraut. Who are you, dude? Like, how did you get into the guns? How did you get into doing what you're doing now? Where'd you go to school?
Yeah.
All the cool, juicy details.
So, I've told this story, before, but I grew up in a house without guns, right? The first gun I ever had, actually, if you want to call it a gun, was a BB gun that I got at a garage sale. And so I learned to shoot in Boy Scouts. And I can remember being down at Camp Horseshoe in Rising Sun, Maryland, and taking rifle merit badge. And there was a Marlin bolt action. I don't remember the model, but it had the peep sights on it. And get behind that gun. And first time I pulled the trigger, and just this stupid grin came over my face, and that was it for me. Like game on. So I took rifle merit badge, and it was all 22s, and I can remember at night you could buy tickets to shoot trap there, or clays anyway. They had a one thrower, and so this is the second gun I ever shot. I think it was a 12 gauge Remington 870, and everything I knew about guns came from media, so I assumed that this was going to have a massive kick and it was going to be very painful. And I get up to the line, they give me the gun, load the gun, and the gentleman running the range says, "Okay, when you're ready, say pull." Pull, bang. Just straight pulled the trigger right away. And he looks at me and says, "You have to aim." And I think for me, it was trying to get over that fear of how bad is this going to be. And then I found out it wasn't actually that bad. So then we started breaking clays and having a good time. So my whole, everything in shooting came from Boy Scouts. That's where I learned it. I turned 18. I bought a shotgun. I was told to get rid of it. I hid it under my bed, and I think my brother let it slip that I had bought one. That was a 20 gauge Remington 870 Express, and I never got rid of that gun. I turned 21. I bought a HK P2000. It's my first handgun.
Nice.
Got a carry permit. My parents saw that come in the mail, and they told me, more or less, I'd be dead in 2-3 weeks. And at the time, this would have been 2000 and. I don't know, 7, somewhere in there, 2008. I'd have to do the math on that. But I started looking around and realizing that, A, the world's kind of a dangerous place, as I'm getting older and paying more attention, and B, that you're responsible for your own safety, which is what led me down this road of wanting to carry a gun, just another tool in a toolbox that hopefully I never have to open up. And I guess it was about 2 or 3 years later that my dad asked me to take him shooting. He was a local judge, and I think he started to have the same realizations I did, just much later in life. So we took him to the range, and after he pulled that trigger, that same stupid smile that was on my face as a kid was on his face. And we went from him, what I would say was probably a pretty solidly anti-gun position, to over time going that, okay, I understand the utility in somebody wanting to carry a gun and a handgun, but still not quite understanding why anybody would need an AR-15 or a 30-round magazine, and kind of really being against it, to we've gone the gamut now, where he thinks people do need them, and it is your right to have them. And it's been interesting to watch that shift within my own family, because that's really helped me in trying to look at how we talk to other people. And I think one of the big problems we have on the pro-gun side, and I know this is getting away from the Adam Kraut thing for a moment, but people on the pro-gun side like to talk in logic and reason, and people on the opposition side tend to do it all based on emotion. Mm-hmm. And they're not compatible languages. So it doesn't matter how much data, statistics, and whatnot you throw in somebody. I feel doesn't change what numbers tell me necessarily, unless they're willing to really sit down and kind of think about that. And let's be honest, that's a pretty high bar. But if you can connect with somebody on a personal level and make it an experience for them, and even if it's an anecdotal one, and really kind of humanize it and the utility and stuff, that starts to change how people think about things. So for me, that experience with my own father has kind of helped me deal with that and with other people who have had diverging opinions, and try to lead the horse to the proverbial water, I guess. So anyway, back to the story of me. So I turned 21. I graduated college. I took a year off. I was working in restaurants at the time, and I figured, well, how can I delay being an adult a little longer? So I decided law school was the answer to that. I went as a night student, so I was working during the day, and it was going into my fourth year, and decided that this would be a good time to probably get an internship so I could be marketable. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Like, I didn't actually really want to be a lawyer. My dad and my uncle had a small private practice where they were general practitioners, and I knew that's not what I wanted to do, and I had no interest in being a litigator. So on a Pennsylvania gun forum, I saw this one lawyer's name constantly repeated because I hung out there. So I looked him up. He was about an hour away, and I sent an email. And the email went along the lines of, "Hi, I'm Adam. I'm in law school, going into my last year, looking for an internship, some other stuff about me. And oh, by the way, I don't think I actually want to practice law." I must be the world's smartest man. I got an email back from his father, who owned the firm, and it was a very small firm, basically saying, yeah, we don't have any internships, paid internships, and probably never tell anybody that again. Okay, so we went back and forth. I said, no, you don't understand. I'm just looking for an internship, and I ended up with an internship there for my last year, which turned into the first 5 years of my job. I was able to get a job there after I passed the bar exam, and Josh, really taught me and was an excellent mentor. Taught me everything I kind of know. So we dealt with individual issues, industry representation, ATF compliance, so that whole gamut. And around that same time, I also was working at a gun shop. I had I had worked at a landscape company as well, went to a gun shop, hired to cast bullets, ended up managing the place. So I was able to take my practical experience behind the gun counter and really see how the legal side impacted and vice versa, and also realizing that, there is the legally correct answer and then there's the practical application of that. And you obviously want to do what's legally right, but the practical side of it sometimes makes it a little more messy to do it. So it was 2019, working as outside counsel. That's when I dipped my toe into the nonprofit world, where I was at another group in the same space for the last 3 years. And then August of last year, 2022? 2022. Time flies. I left there and made a few phone calls just to let a few select people know that I had left. And that's one of those people was Alan Gottlieb, the founder of the Second Amendment Foundation. And I went backpacking in Glacier. I received a number of phone calls, text messages, and a few emails, and we started talking. And I started November 1st of last year as the executive director here. So there was no plan whatsoever. My life and how I've gotten to where I am has been through some work of my own. I'm not going to say like it was all sheer dumb luck, which is what I've usually said in the past, but it's also been a combination of people opening a door or offering an opportunity and me looking at it and saying, you know what, that sounds neat. I want to go do that, and being able to walk through it. And so far it's worked out pretty well for not having any kind of, this is where I want to go.
What year was the guerrilla campaign to get you elected to the NRA board of directors?
Oh yeah, I left that out, didn't I?
You forgot about that little one.
Yeah, that was a history that I long forgotten. I think that started in I think it was 2016 was the first year. So the genesis of that was when I was working at the law firm. My buddy John Patton, who the YouTube channel The Gun Collective, and he and I knew each other actually through car stuff before we found out that we both like guns. So we had a pre-existing relationship, and he worked with me at the gun store as well. He left there, and The Gun Collective was actually what he did next. And I remember seeing it on Instagram and like, wow, this account has so many followers and it's following my stuff. Like, this is why? There's nothing interesting on my Instagram account. And later come to find out it was him. But one day he and I posted some rants on Facebook back when I was more active on it, kind of complaining about how there was not good information being disseminated on YouTube, particularly about legal stuff. It was a bunch of non-lawyers giving their take, and a lot of times it wasn't correct, unfortunately. And so he shot me a text or a message and said, hey, I have an idea. And I think a week later we filmed the first episode of The Legal Brief, a pilot episode, which turned into like a 3-year-long project that explained gun laws. And then it got into bills after we stopped, having federal laws or new legislation that was passed and what the effects of it would be. So that in that same time period, there were a couple of directors on the NRA board who had taken some notice of that and some of the other things I had kind of been involved in and doing, and encouraged me to run. So I thought about it and said, okay, let's give this a shot. So I think 2016 was the first year I ran by petition, where you had to get 250 NRA either qualified members to sign this petition to get you on the ballot. And of course I didn't win. But what was kind of astounding to me was the amount of support that people had, and even more crazy to me was the number of people that signed up as life members just to vote for me. So I felt, and I figured, I'm not going to just try once and throw it in the trash can. So I ran for a second time, and I think I did a little better the second go round. And the third time, by the time I got to the third time, I felt more it was an obligation than anything, and I wasn't too keen on it, but I did it anyway. And after not winning that time, I said, okay, I'm done. I had been offered a job at what would in theory be a competitor organization anyway. And then a lot of those board members resigned. And based on where I fell in the ranking, eventually they called me and said, hey, you have a board position. And I said, thanks, but no thanks. And that's how that panned out. So that was a very interesting ride, and it was very interesting to see the support that people were willing to give. And what still astounds me to this day is the people that were willing to put down that amount of money up front to just vote for me. It meant a lot. It still does mean a lot.
I think that was one of the first exposures that I saw on the whole NRA process and what it actually went through to get somebody elected, and to actually go in and like reshare stuff and share that whole social media push that there was to get you on the board that first time.
Yeah, what was even crazier to some extent, crazier is not the word, but if you're not elected, you can run for the 76th seat at the NRA annual meeting. So there's 75 3-year terms, and there's a 76 1-year term. And because I knew 2 of the board members on the board, the ones that encouraged me, and one of them had successfully done the 76th seat, I went in there with a little bit of an advantage because I kind of knew what needed to be done. So you need volunteers to grab people and like go vote over here, and watching how competitive that got there, and how they really, when they saw I showed up with people who were willing to do that for me, like the number of bodies they started grabbing to get people to vote for the NRA selected person was an interesting experience, I'll say. Glad I did it. Not sad about the way it panned out. I think it was probably for the best for me, particularly with the trajectory, and candidly the stuff I wanted to do, I never would have been able to do alone there. With the board members that supported me leaving, I would have had no allies at all, let alone a very small pool of them. And I think I've been able to have a bigger impact in the issue area going the route I did go. So I'm, it worked out for a reason, I guess.
Cool.
Where'd you go to law school?
I went to Widener University in Wilmington, Delaware.
Oh.
Yeah. So down about a half hour from where I live, so I commuted to school at night. And then my undergrad was up at SUNY Binghamton in New York, upstate New York, which, apparently I learned in college that anything north of New York City is upstate New York, which is pretty much the entire landmass.
Yeah, Ian's from Buffalo, and he's always talking about, it's completely different.
It is. Yeah, it's that was also a cool experience. When we were talking about this out in the hallway earlier, in the context of California, everybody says, oh, New York and California and Jersey and a lot of these places are super liberal, and sometimes that's true, but usually it's the urban areas where the population density is off the wall, and you go to the rest of the state and like they like guns, they like the same things we do, and I think everybody just kind of forgets that because the cities control what the rest of the state does.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, there's a massive population in California that is, farming communities, and the northern part of Cali where it's redwood forests and little towns, and it's not all just the urban mega center that we have at the southern side. So
yeah, when I was up in Fresno, I did Sequoia and Kings Canyon in 2021. I went backpacking up there, and yeah, it was, there were Trump signs everywhere. It was a whole different world. And then you go to, fly out of LAX. I didn't that time, but you go into LA and you're, well, okay, this is like a different country relative to that. So it is interesting. But I think that's the problem, across the board in any number of states for that matter.
Yeah, Houston is definitely a different demographic than we are here. We're just 45 minutes north.
Yeah, same with Chicago and, the rest of Illinois. And,
oh, yeah.
I think it's pretty much anywhere you have a major city or really high population density.
Yeah.
Sure. So what do you see? So enough about Adam, right?
Sure.
Right, we're good.
I'm good.
Now we're on to the good stuff.
Now we're very recently, as in last week. So we're recording this on November 14th, 2023. If you're listening down the road, which I hope you are. But last week they came out with a ruling on the pistol brace ban. Can you go into that for us?
Yeah, I can. So, a little backstory I think is important here. End of 2020, I think, is when ATF originally released their point system, and it was just they just came out with 2 or 3 page. This is how we're going to evaluate things going forward. It wasn't through the rulemaking process. And actually, the Second Amendment Foundation, along with Rainier Arms and 2 individuals, sued them before this ever got into the rulemaking process. Shortly thereafter, ATF said, okay, we'll go do the rulemaking stuff. So our case ended up being admitted. We agreed to keep continuing it until they came out with a final rule. So final rule comes out. We amend our complaint. Other complaints get filed. Last I looked, I think there's 8 lawsuits challenging the brace rule. Currently today, there are 3 where preliminary injunctions were granted. There are 3 where preliminary injunctions were denied, and they're all up on appeal at the circuit courts. And there are 2 cases where there's not been a decision issued yet, and I think they're all on preliminary injunctions as well. So that's kind of where the board stands. The case you're talking about from last week, the name's escaping me, but it was 3 disabled veterans, I believe, and it was in one of the Texas districts. The judge there, it was I think a 9-page opinion, basically said, Fifth Circuit looked at this. Fifth Circuit said that the logical outgrowth of the rule didn't match. And granted the preliminary injunction. There wasn't a whole lot of meat in this opinion. It was kind of short. The mock case in the district court, it had denied a preliminary injunction, went up on appeal, and that's the one that the Fifth Circuit came back with and sent these all back down to the district court and kind of said, here, you figure out some stuff, but like you're not bound to just work within the confines if there's other things you want to add. So unfortunately, in our case, yesterday we got a denial of our preliminary injunction, and we appealed that immediately. So we're going up to the Fifth Circuit on ours, and we'll see where that goes. But hopefully that'll be a quick reversal, and then back down to the merits and on our way here. So I think all the cases where injunctions were granted are in the Fifth Circuit. There was a Fourth Circuit case that's up on appeal, and then there's I think it's in the Eighth Circuit that's up on appeal as well right now. There's a case in Florida, which is the 11th Circuit, and I don't remember where the last one is. So right now, based on my understanding of what I read, there is a nationwide injunction against the brace ban.
Which means, in layman's terms,
I've watched like 2 seasons of Suits, so I'm pretty much a lawyer now.
Perfect.
But
it's totally like that as well, by the way. So with nationwide injunction, and this is, I guess, an interesting and important distinction to make. So when those injunctions were originally issued, at least in our case, it was for the named plaintiffs, so Rainier Arms, the 2 individuals, and the Second Amendment Foundation. And we went back and sought clarification, and the court said, well, it also applies to your members. So anybody at the time who was a SAF member was also covered by it. What the court didn't do was say that it's a nationwide injunction totally, which means it would apply to everybody. In this particular context, I believe it is a nationwide injunction, but you should probably look at what the opinion says just to be sure, because I'm going off my memory here. It's not in front of me. And that would really be the difference. There is a lot of debate about nationwide injunctions in the courts and whether they're appropriate or whether the appropriate relief is only for the parties themselves and potentially their members if they are a membership-based organization. That hasn't quite been settled yet. So,
what do you think the logical progression is of this? Like, what do you think, is the ATF going to come back, or like, I guess what using your crystal ball, what do you see?
No, I mean, I think you could probably safely say that the government will probably fight this back on up to the Fifth Circuit. Given what we've seen come out of the Fifth Circuit since Bruin, and more broadly probably in some other cases, and a lot of these were done in the context of the Administrative Procedures Act and not the Second Amendment, which there's a difference there. You're talking about administrative law versus a constitutional right. So administrative law, particularly the APA, has been pretty well developed given the numerous years and number of administrative agencies. But I would expect that they likely would, when there's a merits decision, go back up to the Fifth Circuit and probably go to the Supreme Court. I can't imagine that they're going to let it sit, because really at the end of the day, if they want the rule to stand, they're going to have to kind of get it up to the Supreme Court anyway, particularly if those other circuit courts uphold the denial of the injunctions, and ultimately if they don't win on the merits, if other circuit courts, it'll create a circuit split, and that would be something that SCOTUS would be interested potentially in leveling the playing field on. Also, in the interim, it's possible that the Supreme Court decides an administrative procedures case that everybody can look at and go, okay, that applies to this situation, and maybe the circuit courts don't have that split. Best guess, sitting here today.
How does that fall into, and I can be totally wrong on this, is where, I believe like last year when Judge Thomas sent stuff back, it basically said, we're not looking at this, rule on it with historic precedents, and it's in your court. Like, don't send it up to here anymore. How does that fall into this? Did I summarize that correctly, kind of?
Kind of. I think I know where you're going with that. So when Bruin was decided, there were, excuse me, there were a number of Supreme Court or cert petitions sitting there. I think there were 4. One of them was also one of our cases, an assault weapons ban from Maryland. And so the court held those cert petitions while it was deciding Bruin because the justices knew it would be directly applicable. What happened was after Bruin was decided, they granted those cert petitions, vacated all the circuit court opinions, and remanded them back to the courts for a decision that was consistent with what was said in Bruin. Some of those cases got kicked back down to the district court because the circuit court said, like, here, you figure it out and bring it back to us and we'll take a look. Our assault weapons ban case in the Fourth Circuit, we did additional briefing, oral argument was held, and we're currently waiting for a decision out of that. Whether it applies directly here, not really, because none of these were up on appeal. Our case in particular does raise a Second Amendment claim, so the analysis in Bruin, the text as informed by history and tradition, would be applicable to that claim, but that's about the only way it would interact.
Okay. And California assault weapons ban.
Sure.
The big one on the table.
Yeah, it's one of the big ones on the table. So another Benitez decision. That was, another SAF case that originally went to trial, won at trial, went up on appeal, and then, Bruin, we're back down there. Recently decided, at this point I can't remember, 3-4 weeks ago, somewhere in that range. And that was another win again on that point. Benitez had decided a magazine capacity case a couple weeks prior, which is ahead procedurally. He administratively stayed his decision against the California assault weapons ban for 10 days. And even if he hadn't, the Attorney General would have petitioned the Ninth Circuit for a stay pending appeal. Ninth Circuit granted that anyway. Last I looked at the orders, I think oral argument, and there's a briefing schedule now, and I think oral argument is sometime in January on the Miller stuff. The Ninth Circuit believes that Duncan will control that because there's a lot of overlapping factors, and that's the magazine case. So it's just going to be a matter of kind of how quickly the Ninth Circuit sorts through it. I believe Duncan went back to an en banc panel, so I guess for those that don't know, typically when you're at a circuit court, particularly the first go, it's a 3-judge panel. After that decision, any party could ask the court as a whole, and in the Ninth Circuit, because there's so many judges, it's not the entire court, but it's, I think, 12 or 13, to rehear it. And what an en banc panel can do is either overrule the panel decision or it can uphold it. And they don't take anything that people ask for. It's in some ways, like a cert petition, there's some discretion. There really needs to be a very good reason, and I can't remember what the exact language is, but it really needs to be a compelling point of law that has to be decided and that was potentially decided wrongly or not. So that went back straight to an en banc panel, which means it'll control everything. And then from there, you'd be looking at a cert petition to the Supreme Court. And, I don't know how that's going to go. Obviously, the Ninth Circuit's been very hostile to gun rights. I think prior to Bruin, so between Heller and Bruin, I think there were 50 Second Amendment cases that went through the Ninth Circuit. Some of them, there were great panel decisions that were wins, and then the en banc court came and quashed all of them. So if they continue that, it's possible that it'll be another cert petition that maybe the Supreme Court will finally take up and say, you know what, not only do we want to address the topic, but we want to tell you, the circuit, you've been doing this wrong. And the Ninth Circuit is, as far as circuit courts, the most overruled in the nation, constantly by the Supreme Court on any number of issues. So they apparently constantly don't do it right.
So what does that look like for gun owners? Like, like hypothetically, if the Supreme Court does start looking at these cases and rules in favor, what could we possibly have?
That's a
General question, right?
no. It's I'm trying to think of how to give an articulate response to that. So I guess maybe the easiest way to do this is kind of just to recount what the Supreme Court has decided, and we'll ignore Miller from the 30s, which I know everybody kind of points to, and that dealt with short barrel shotguns. But I think for most people, it's kind of safe to say that the world really began with Heller. Heller said, owning a gun is an individual right, untethered to malicious service. Talked about keeping firearms in the home. It did even talk about bear, and it set forth the test, which was text as informed by history and tradition. The circuit courts from there, decided a two-step test, and interest balancing was appropriate, and we'll come back to that. So you get Heller in 2008. In 2010, you get a Second Amendment Foundation case, McDonald, which opened the doorway for everybody being able to sue states and municipalities the way we're currently doing all that stuff. It's worth mentioning Catano in 2016 came out of a Massachusetts Supreme Court and dealt with stun guns, and really, in a opinion, the Supreme Court just said, these are protected arms. They didn't have to be in existence at the time of the founding. And then, of course, last year we get Bruin, which confirmed that, yes, there is, in fact, a right to bear arms outside the home. There may be some places that you can't do that, and they had specifically named polling places, legislative assemblies, and courts, and that was it. And in theory, well, not in theory, but there's the logical outgrowth of that is that there's government-provided security. And in theory, if you're going to call a place a sensitive place, you'd have to somehow connect it to that, and I think we have five challenges dealing with sensitive places post-Bruin because of all the response bills. The other thing Bruin said was, okay, that two-step test you guys have been doing for the last 13 years, wrong. It's the text of the Second Amendment as informed by this nation's history and tradition, and the history that you need to look at is around the time of the founding. That's the most, the word's escaping me, but that's the relevant history. The further you get away temporally from that time period, the less of an understanding there is. There is an argument currently that's kind of academic in nature that says, well, we could also look to the time of the ratification of the 14th Amendment, but I think that falls short because those constitutional rights that are ratified, you're ratifying what the federal understanding of the right was, and the federal understanding of the right was what was in 1791. So that's what Bruin said. Now, where the Supreme Court will go from there, assuming it has an appetite for gun cases, I think you have a high likelihood of seeing something on sensitive places because that's very relevant to the carry issue. Logically, you would also get potentially something dealing with assault weapons bans or magazine capacity restrictions because what they haven't really clearly articulated is what are the bounds of common arms and common use, and are these constitutionally protected or not. No circuit court to date has said they are, but I think that wouldn't be a far cry from what the Supreme Court would consider next. The other potential would be, permitting restrictions. We'll see what post-Bruin enactments have done to, okay, we need to issue permits, but how can we make this an arduous process? And then, of course, most recently they just heard Rahimi the other week, which dealt with an individual out of Texas who was subject to a domestic violence restraining order, had firearms. Fifth Circuit opinion said that that did not conform with the nation's history and tradition, and the Supreme Court took that one up. I suspect that one, I'm not going to guess what the court could do other than it could, if it wanted to, craft some very limited language. The prohibited persons issue is a very interesting one that I've litigated a couple cases in that issue area, and it's Rahimi is not a good vehicle for it. He was wasn't arrested for stealing a bottle of ketchup off the shelf that costs more than whatever. But you look at the prohibited persons issue, and what a lot of people don't realize is that federal law, it's a state. If you're convicted of a state law misdemeanor, that's punishable by more than 2 years imprisonment. It doesn't matter whether you serve any time; it's just to be punishable by more than 2 years imprisonment. You're federally prohibited from possessing a firearm. And there's a lot of crimes that are nonviolent, candidly kind of stupid, that just dump these people into their buckets, and they're forever unable to get back their rights short of receiving a pardon from their governor for the state law offense. ATF doesn't do federal firearms relief determinations anymore. That's something that they cut off funding for in the 90s. They just said we're not going to fund it. The law still provides for it. So there's a lot of people out there that may have had a bad lapse in judgment, or got convicted of something that isn't a violent offense, shouldn't prohibit them from being able to possess firearms and ammunition for their own self-defense, and yet they are.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So staff, Second Amendment Foundation, what do y'all do, and can you give us like a brief overview of that?
Sure. I'll catch my breath.
Yeah,
You're good. You're good.
take some water.
See, this is where your sidekick would come in handy.
She knows the history. She's been around. She's heard me say
There's
it
still
enough.
time. We can still we can make it happen.
We can plug the headset.
We have the technology.
I'm just giving her a hard time.
Okay, so Second Amendment Foundation. It was founded in 1974 by Alan Gottlieb. It's based out of Bellevue, Washington. And next year will be our 50th anniversary. The organization was founded, Alan's intent at the time was really to figure out how to elevate a case to the Supreme Court. So the early years were spent working with scholars and lawyers to kind of envision a pathway there, write a lot of articles both for law reviews, for public consumption to help shift public opinion and things like that. One of the other interesting things out of 1974 that's worth mentioning, not SAF related, but that's the first time you get a law review article written that posits that the Second Amendment is in fact an individual right untethered to malicious service. So this is all kind of happening around that time period. So SAF in its early years was really heavy into the litigation stuff. Our first lawsuit that occurred, I think, was in 1982 against Dianne Feinstein's handgun ban in San Francisco, which we won. And then a year later, we brought a similar challenge to a city up in Connecticut that escapes me. Same thing, total handgun ban, and we also won that. There's a lot of publishing that goes on in the 80s. More, you get the Gun Rights Policy Conference, may have been in the 70s, as well as the Legal Scholars Conference, which was bringing together, a bunch of lawyers, scholars, activists to share information. This is pre-internet, so devising tactics, things like that. And both those continue to this day. We had our 38th annual Gun Rights Policy Conference back at the end of September, and we have another one that'll be next year as well. You get some lawsuits in the 90s, but as I kind of said earlier, like the world really began with Heller. And so there were McDonald, the Supreme Court case in 2010 was ours. Since our inception, we've been involved in over 250 cases, whether it's either as a party directly, as an amicus, supporting somebody else's case, or in some instances funding cases where it wasn't appropriate for us to be a named plaintiff in that case. So an example of that would be going back to the prohibited persons issue real quick. There was two individuals that brought challenges in the Third Circuit, so out of Pennsylvania, that the Third Circuit heard that the Second Amendment Foundation funded, and actually were the only cases, the only circuit opinion that found that those individuals, in fact, were not prohibited and had their rights restored through that. So that was pretty cool. For a circuit court opinion, anyway, that was a pretty cool thing because I litigated cases based on that opinion. So, anyway, so we'll sometimes just fund cases where it's not appropriate for the organization to be a named party on that. There's so much stuff. The educational component is also a very big one of the organization over the years, just trying to shift that public opinion and giving people the information. And that was, again, done through publishing newsletters, radio ads. At one point, the organization and its sister C4, which predates SAF by about 3 years, actually bought radio stations back when the media wasn't allowing those messages to get out. And this was, I think, sometime in the early 90s, but as a way to promote a positive voice and a delivery mechanism that wasn't going to be censored. So that's, a very brief, high-level overview of the organization as it existed. Since I've come on board, I've looked at it and said, okay, I think there's things we can do more of and do better. I came in with a very solid legal program. We have 53 active cases right now. There are 8 assault weapon ban challenges, 6 magazine capacity challenges, 4 or 5 cases dealing with 18 to 20-year-olds, whether it's purchase of handguns from FFLs, semi-automatic centerfire rifles, carry, sensitive places challenges dealing with First Amendment issues in advertising, some more nuanced things like whether or not a foster parent can have a gun unlocked in their home. There's some state agencies that have regulations that say no to that. There's a whole gamut of stuff which are on the website. I have a hard time remembering all of it.
It's a lot going on.
And what's the website for those listening?
It's saf.org. Yeah, good plug. I should have done that myself.
Which has just been revamped.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Looks very nice.
Thank you. Yeah, that was something that was a long time coming, and my cohort off screen was a big part of making sure that got done because I would not have been able to chase that down myself. So I see a very big opportunity, to continue with the legal program, and not a big opportunity. Like that makes total sense, and we should keep doing it. But I do see an opportunity, particularly in the educational aspect, to really grow that much bigger than what it is and implement some new things, so video content, things like that. And that's, I think, going into 2024, that's where I'm kind of looking. The legal stuff's not going to go away. We're going to continue to do that. That's our bread and butter. It's what we're known for. And, to the extent we can continue to sue more people and, keep chipping away at what's been taken, or whether it's long ago or more recently, we're going to keep doing that. So that's part of my master plan here. We'll be active. So we're a C3. What we can't do is tell people like grassroots lobbying, tell people to lobby stuff. We can comment on policy and why this is a good policy or a bad policy, and you'll see that from time to time with us. It's a line I want to be very careful walking to not jeopardize tax status over that. There's a separate organization that can tell people who to vote for or tell your representatives X, Y, Z, and I'll let them do their thing there. But the courts right now are very good and favorable, and that's an avenue we're going to keep using to beat down doors, and we're very fortunate to work with a number of very talented attorneys, some of the best attorneys in the country on this issue area in a variety of locations. So we're very lucky to have them at our disposal, and they want to work with us, which is awesome.
So what can our listeners do to help support your foundation?
Sure. Well, the first thing would be, I would encourage everybody to go check out the website, learn a little bit more about us if I haven't given you a convincing, enough pitch anyway. Really the biggest way people can help is financially. And, I've always hated saying that. But the other thing I will continue to have this attitude is if you like what you see, please support us. And if you don't, hopefully we'll get there one day. I'm not going to be one of those people that goes out there and says, you need to donate to us, and that's the end of the story. I truly do hope that people like what they see. If you are giving us money, the next thing would be tell everybody about us. One of the things that we want to do is make sure people are aware we exist. And that's a problem that everybody has, hey, we're over here, and we've been here for a long time doing these things. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going into and this is a little bit of a segue, but we're going into our 50th anniversary next year. And one of the things I have planned is a campaign around the 50th anniversary, kind of recounting what SAF has done over the years, because it's not really in the public sphere. Either you know about it because you were involved or you somehow knew the organization. So I really want to tell the world what it is we've done, what we're currently doing, and what the vision is for the future, because that's where we're headed. And so I would tell you the website's the best delivery mechanism for that right now. Follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, whatever the hell it is, LinkedIn. And we do have a YouTube channel. There's not a lot of content on there. That's something that I'm hoping to change, in the coming year. So those would be really the biggest things. I'm not sure. Am I forgetting anything? I'm not forgetting anything. It's been confirmed.
It's been confirmed. We're good. So what, I know you already talked about some of the cases that are ongoing right now. Which ones are you most excited about or most involved with, maybe?
I am directly litigating a 18 to 20-year-old handgun ban in West Virginia. That case was one that we actually came in and took over one of the plaintiffs in it actually filed a pro se case, and then reached out to us, and we said, yeah, of course we're interested. We'll get you squared away, dude. So that one's of interest because I'm actually litigating that case, and I don't want to be doing law anymore, but here I am. They're all kind of interesting, and it's hard to say what I'm excited about because I think they all add value to either the restoration, defense, or expansion of the right. I think everybody loves assault weapon ban challenges. There's millions of people affected by that. Same with the magazine capacity issue. The sensitive places ones are also really important because you have states that are wholesale, saying, yeah, you can carry in your house and in your car, but like everything else, no. Those are all off limits, and that affects a lot of people and their ability to defend themselves. And then you get into the more nuanced issues, like I said earlier, the foster parents. Are there a lot of people that are affected by that? No, but there's still people affected by it. And I think one of the things that's most satisfying about this is when you win, seeing how it directly affects some of these plaintiffs' lives. And actually, we had talked, I think at the beginning, we talked about me being in Arizona at that Area 2 match. And so I was sitting at the table with Alan, and I see this gentleman walking up, and I look at his shirt, and it's Bill Drummond. That name rings a bell. And he comes up, and it turns out that I was right. It should ring a bell because he was a plaintiff in one of our cases. And he had purchased a gun range that was previously operated. It was zoned for that, and the zoning board decided to rezone it so he couldn't operate.
Oh, geez.
Which resulted in a 3-year lawsuit that the Second Amendment Foundation championed. And he came up to Alan. It was the first time they'd ever met. They had talked on the phone a number of times and exchanged emails, and he was so grateful that somebody took that up for him. Because he said, it saved my life, it saved my business, and and we were able to do something that not only positively affected him, but also positively affected the area law. And I think a lot of times that impact on people's lives is missed in all of this. People look at a big picture, but you are helping an individual or a swath of individuals in the process, and that I think is the most gratifying part of it. As far as what case, I don't think it matters.
So on that West Virginia thing that you mentioned, can that be used as precedence later, or is that?
Yeah, so there's 2 challenges that deal with the ATF, the federal law banning FFLs from transferring handguns to anyone under 21. There's one that came out of I think the Western District of Louisiana that I think is up at the Fifth Circuit now. I'm sorry. There's 2 cases that we're directly involved with. There's one in Virginia that we're not, and there's one in West Virginia. There may be 1 or 2 others, but the answer is yes. So if we win in the district court, and I don't know how that's going to go, I'm still waiting for an opinion. It's sitting out on summary judgment. If we win on the district court, I would expect the government appeals to the Fourth Circuit. Whatever the Fourth Circuit says will control the states that are contained within there. West Virginia, Maryland, 1 or 2 of the Carolinas, and I think there's 1 other state. If the Fifth Circuit reaches a different conclusion, the states in the Fifth Circuit, so Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, they would have, it would be a different ball game for them. They would potentially be able to buy handguns from dealers, and people in the Fourth Circuit would not. You get splits like that, and again, that's where potentially the Supreme Court steps in. Now, are 2 circuits enough for that? Maybe, maybe not. But yeah, and then the other thing you can do, particularly when it's a circuit court opinion, is cite it for persuasive authority. You can also do it with a district court opinion. So easiest way to say it is if we're litigating a case in Pennsylvania and there's a let's say a Seventh Circuit case, because it's nowhere near there, you can say hey, look, the Seventh Circuit found this, and the court you're in, okay, it's persuasive or it's not, but they're not bound to whatever that said. Unlike the circuit court that district court sits under, that would control anything there, and then of course the Supreme Court controls all of it. So think of it like a column essentially.
Okay.
The lowest level you have your district courts. Above those you have your circuit courts, the appellate courts, and any of the district courts that fall under a particular circuit court, they're bound to what that circuit court says. If a circuit court over here says something different, they can point to it and say, hey, you should consider that, particularly if the one they're under hasn't said anything on the issue. But it's just persuasive. And then Supreme Court rules all until people make up their own rules, and away we go again.
Cool. That was a pretty good overview. I like that visualization with the columns. That's good.
I'll keep that in mind. I'm gonna have to remember that and come back to this episode.
Yeah, they didn't cover that in Suits, so I'm glad you touched on it.
In Texas, didn't they just change the concealed handgun licensing? Like, can't 18-year-olds get a CHL?
I believe that happened. I don't know if they changed it. I think that was the result of a lawsuit.
Okay.
But my memory's fuzzy on that point.
Yeah, I don't. It didn't apply to me, so I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, and that was about it. So I don't know. I'd have to look into it. Didn't you just get your CHL instructor cert?
Yeah. No, actually, I've applied for it. I had it, let it lapse like 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm applying for it again.
Okay.
Just for the heck of it.
I'll have to get off, get and look this up and see how that applies to some of our
I should probably know that.
So do you guys have classes you have to take to get licenses here?
Yeah, so to get a license, there's two
ways to carry in Texas. You've got constitutional carry,
mm-hmm.
and then you have the ability to get a CHL.
LTC.
Right? License to carry.
So with LTC, there's a couple advantages, like no NICS check, because it's one of those.
One of the exemption states.
Exactly.
You can carry a few other places. Very limited, different. Yeah.
Yeah. But recently we this past constitutional carry, so basically, or permitless carry, I guess is probably the better term for it. But
okay.
Yeah, for a while there, LTC was like the only way to do it. And that was a class, used to be 2 days. They shortened it down to 1 day, which was when I took it was an 8-hour class. And then the most recent one was a 4-hour. So 4-hour class, and then you have to shoot like 50 rounds. There's like a target. It's like a B-27 big, huge target, 3, 5, and 15 yards.
It's wild. Where I'm from, it's just $20, and you go to the sheriff's office with the application.
Yeah, so we've actually made some pretty good ground on the Texas side. Like, it used to be a couple $100.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I think now it's down to like $40 or $50 or something.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah,
I'm actually looking at it.
Over the past 10 years, it's gotten quite a bit better.
It sounds like when you were explaining it was a 2-day to a 1 day to a 4 hour. They're whittling it down. It's very fascinating to me to hear about the requirements in different states and how drastically different some are from others. Like it's New York. The requirements there are wild. Same with New Jersey, and granted, some of that's post Bruin now that they actually have to issue licenses. But and then you go to other states, and it's like, give us your form and $20 and a 5-year permit.
Yeah, I know at one point. Go ahead.
I was just saying, or permitless carry, where
just go for it.
Just do it, man.
Yeah, Vermont's been that way for forever. So interesting stuff.
Yeah, I know a few years ago I don't know if they actually did it, but you could they were trying to get where you could take the CHL course online.
Yeah.
And then all you had to do is go into a range and take the live fire portion.
Yeah.
Is that still how it is? Or?
I believe so. Like when it originally came out, I think there's like there was like a huge requirement to be able to facilitate an online class.
Yeah.
And basically by default, there'd only be like 1 or 2 companies that could actually offer it. So it was cool on paper, but in practice, like there was not really a whole lot of practical.
That's how a lot of things are.
Yeah.
This is a great idea.
We looked at that in my previous employer because we saw everything that was required to it to be able to do it, and it was a huge list of requirements. You're like, okay, somebody who had a hand in writing these requirements have these requirements, and so you knew that, like, okay, there's only going to be 1 or 2 people that in the state of Texas is going to be able to actually do the online portion of that, because that would have been an easy moneymaker.
Yeah.
I
would imagine so.
Yeah, log on, take this class, and then show up at your local range and take the shooting portion.
Yeah.
But I still got a year apparently on my LTC. I just checked.
Oh, I need to check mine.
Yeah. It's one of those things you got. But then the NICS check's the reason why I
the NICS check's
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then there's very, very few places that have the, like, what is it, the 30-07 or whatever it is.
I think 30-07's open carry.
Open carry. You can't open carry. I don't know if there's a place a difference between the prohibited areas that you could say, oh, well, you can't constitutionally or you can't just carry here.
Another cool thing that they did is so we have signs 30-6 is the Texas Penal Code section of the law that deals with where you can and cannot carry, but they made it a way so now if you're carry past that sign basically, and it's not like a federal building or a court or a polling place or whatever, it's only a Class C misdemeanor now.
Okay.
So they took away, I think it was a Class B or maybe even a felony.
Yeah.
But now basically they removed all the teeth from it. So Class C misdemeanor in Texas is like a speeding ticket, $200 fine, and then no.
No jail time.
Yeah, none at all.
And I believe they have to ask you to leave.
Yeah, so they have to
And
ask
then
you
you have
to
to
leave.
refuse.
So it's kind of like
And then-
trespass.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a really good advancement that they made probably 7 years ago. But
I was familiar with the signs, and I remember there being penalties attached to them. But and I know other states, they post signs, and it's the same thing. Like, well, you got to go, and if you refuse to leave, then you get trespassed.
Yeah.
But the signs didn't carry the weight of law that the Texas ones used to anyway.
yeah,
And if it's not a certain print and if it's illegible, there's all these ways around it. I'd be like,
1-inch lettering.
what is that? Oh,
conspicuously
I can't
dis-
read that. That's
That
horrible.
explains why they're all uniform on the side of buildings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's got to be 1-inch lettering, contrasting colors, posted at the entrance. Yeah, there's a whole.
Yeah.
Whole big to do about it. But that's what you get when you get lawyers involved, right?
Yeah. Terrible.
The worst.
Yeah. I hate it.
So what do you got coming up, man? Maybe personally or with the foundation? What are you excited about?
What am I excited
Going home?
about? No. It's hunting. It's pheasant hunting season at home right now, so I've been running around with my
You still in Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been running around with my dog doing that most mornings right now, trying to get him out. He's a year and a half old, so this is his first season. Usually also to just kind of wear him out some. It's not really working.
He's an excited young pup.
He is. And I'll tell you what, when you limit out with 2 birds in 45 minutes, you're like, oh, this did nothing for you, huh?
Yeah. I think he's just getting warmed up.
Yeah, you're gonna by the time we get back home, you're gonna be raring to go again. So it's it's fall, leaves are changing. That's nice. I'm gonna have some leaf cleanup ahead of me. I'm looking forward to that. I don't know. We got some things coming up at work that are some internal projects that I'm excited about. Dealing with some of the newer staff members and still kind of getting them integrated into the culture I'm trying to build there and where I want to go. And I guess we'll hit, some of the holidays and then off to SHOT Show.
Yep.
It's the desert again.
The next big event.
Yeah, probably. Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, need to wind down for the rest of the year.
I don't know. We're
about to ramp up.
Yeah, we're about to ramp up. Starting. We're like 2 days away from our first Black Friday
I was
email
going to
going
say,
out.
it's that time of year, right?
Yeah.
Black
Oh, yeah.
Friday.
Yeah, that's the big part of the year
Stretching
for
the
us.
legs.
Black Friday and then Cyber Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Basically, the last 10 days of November, you just might as well count as like Black Friday event. And here we go.
Yeah. Well,
So,
it's something anyway.
and we're looking for a couple favorable Supreme Court decisions to kind of just squash California, and that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping for those guys to get their rights back.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be amazing.
Yeah, that's the whole point. It's an interesting state of affairs where you live under a federal constitution, and in theory, everybody should have the same rights, and yet you go from one state to another state, and it's not all the same. And hopefully over time we'll be able to alleviate that issue.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about it multiple times in this show, but California's not even the worst offender at this point.
Yeah, Washington, and
Washington's
Illinois.
really bad. Illinois is horrible when it comes to what we can actually ship. And
They all. I think California is probably the genesis of most of it. It's always been a model. Not to say that they're always the first to do it, but there certainly are other places that are equally bad in a lot of ways. I think California just passes more laws more quickly because the legislature loves to just crank it out.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of states where it isn't great to be. Washington is absolutely one of them. They, they passed an assault weapons ban recently, and we sued them. We sued them about that too. Oregon's another one where we filed 2 lawsuits at, I think, the end of last year with their, I think it was magazine capacity and then permits for purchase, and they didn't even have a system set up. You need this permit, but we have no way of actually delivering.
No way to facilitate it.
Right, yeah.
What has ended up happening to that?
That's those are both up in the Ninth Circuit right now.
So are they still not able to buy right now, or is it just they can still buy, but because the law is not actually being enforced, or what's going on?
I believe there is a injunction in a state court against that, which has kind of leveled the field there, and the federal stuff is proceeding differently. If memory serves, I haven't looked at that case in a while, but it was the whole just, you're going to need this thing, but we don't have any way to actually implement this program, and we don't even have it really on paper yet. And by the way, it starts in a month. Okay, well, hold on a second.
Yeah.
This is just not practical.
Yeah.
You can't just tell people they can't exercise their right to acquire arms because you set some arbitrary date and you have nothing in place for it other than too bad, so sad.
Oh, sorry about
that
you.
doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then the FBI's like, we're not going to do background checks for you for that.
Right. Yeah. Not our job.
Not our job. So it's just absolutely nuts.
It is.
Anyway. So where can people find out more information about you?
Me? Nowhere. The website, saf.org.
There you go.
Instagram.
Nope. Got off social media.
What about SAF?
Yeah.
We don't care about you.
Yeah, we don't care.
Perfect.
We're back.
Let's go back.
Yeah.
So you can find out more about the Second Amendment Foundation at saf.org. So it's saf.org. It's Second Amendment Foundation on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and then X or Twitter, whichever you want to call it. It's 2AFDN. At 2AFDN is the Twitter handle. For whatever reason, we couldn't get Second Amendment Foundation. Don't ask me why. And I would say that's probably the best places to find out more information about us.
Cool.
Fantastic. I think that's all my questions. Actually, wait, we had a question.
Uh-oh.
We did have a question.
From the audience?
From the audience, from Facebook this morning. I think it's food related.
Oh, man. It's about what the best Texas barbecue is. I hold no opinion.
Yeah. That's a safe position.
Favorite cheesesteak?
Favorite cheesesteak? Probably one from my local pizza shop because the ones in Philadelphia are not all that great.
Who asked that question?
Rich Herkins from the Facebook group. And I think we've got David Rubecki's question. With courts changing their minds so much on certain gun rules and cases, when is the right time to sell or not sell a product?
There's no time like today.
Yeah. Best time was yesterday?
Yeah. Interesting question. Really, there probably is no right time. If you wait, how much of the market share did you lose before the door potentially closes altogether, or and you could never bring it to market? So I would say no time like the present.
Yeah, that's always a hard one. I know we went through looking for a couple different options on getting attorneys around the country to talk to us on stuff about the California, can you ship, can you not ship, can you ship, and now it's just kind of like, okay, let's just wait and see. Here we go.
Well, the problem with lawyers is there's this, not black and white always.
Yep.
There's this gray area, and we love to operate in the, well, it could, but it also couldn't. This is what will happen if I'm wrong, and this is what will happen if I'm right. And yeah, it's depending upon who you talk to, there might be a diverging viewpoint too. You could talk to 2 lawyers about the same issue, and they could tell you 2 very different things. So
sure.
I'm sure that's very frustrating as a retailer.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it
navigating the constantly changing political climate and not necessarily political.
Can I ship that?
Am I going to go to jail?
Magpul ejection port cover? That 77 cent worth of plastic and everything. Yeah. Can I send that to somebody and we'll get
Is it a parts kit?
Anyway, we appreciate your time today, sir, and yours as well.
I have one more thing, though.
Oh.
So we've talked about support. We didn't talk about our support from big techs to what we do. As a corporate partner.
Well, come on down. Fair. That's a very good point. Thank you. What would I do without her? I don't know where you want to put this in the podcast.
That's
so
fine.
you can
Right
figure
here.
that out.
People just watch. So.
Perfect. Okay, so we're back to the outtakes again. So one of the things I want to thank you guys for is your support of us. You've been very generous with having us on the podcast, but also financially as far as promoting us on your website, cycling us through with a couple other groups you support and then matching that donation, of course. And I guess it goes back to what I said earlier that, money financially, like money makes the world go round. We have lawyers to pay. We have staff to pay. Like none of this is free, unfortunately. And even the people who put in more time than, is what they're being paid for. Like at the end of the day, this all costs money and awareness. So we're very grateful for both of those from you folks.
Absolutely.
It means a lot that you believe in us like that.
Yeah, we're happy to support people that are and organizations that are fighting the good fight. So more than happy to.
Awesome.
Definitely. And we'll be doing more stuff together in the future.
Sweet.
Speaking of the future, if you've listened to this podcast all the way through and haven't contributed or don't know much about 2AF, Second Amendment Foundation. SAF.
We're doing SAF.
We're doing SAF
Yeah.
now. So, if you've listened to this whole podcast, you now know more about SAF. And you know why you should be donating. So, check their website out. The link's going to be in the comments below or in the description on your favorite podcast player. Leave us a review. Let us know what you think. And thanks for tuning in. And since Ian's not here today, stay strapped or get clapped. Thank you.
Thanks for watching.
And